You're in this one.
Hi, my name is Tammy Lee Marche, and in collaboration with the Indignants, I'm going to interview Steve Darcy, who is an Associate Professor of Philosophy at the Huron University College, part of the UWO here in London, and he is also a social activist. We decided that we wanted to interview Steve in particular today because we wanted to get some clarity around what direct democracy is and how potentially the Occupy movement is moving forward toward that sort of government system. Hi Steve, thank you for being here.
Hi, Tim.
I'm wondering, what, first of all, does the Occupy movement mean to you?
Well, to me, the Occupy movement is really important as a kind of transformation or an attempt of the people to transform our understanding of democracy and our practice of democracy, and to challenge the unresponsive systems of power that have been dominating our politics as well as our economics. And so it's about people taking charge of their own communities, taking charge of their own lives.
Okay, so right now our system in Canada is what you would refer to as a representative democracy. And the Occupy movement is more in support of maybe potentially changing that system towards a direct democracy. Could you explain both systems a little bit to me?
Okay, well, I guess I would say that a representative democracy is a form of democracy where you get to choose, where the people get to choose who is going to govern them, who is going to rule over them. And a participatory or direct democracy is one in which people get to rule or govern themselves, right? So you could think of it a bit like if a family's hiring a babysitter and they let the kids choose from a list of 2 or 3 babysitters, the kids get to choose who they want to be the babysitter from a list of 2 or 3, but they're still going to have a babysitter. It's very different from as they get older, they get to take care of themselves. They don't need a babysitter, right? They take charge of their own lives, right, and decide what they're going to do and when they're going to go to sleep as they get older and become an adult. And really, in a way, a representative democracy is one where we're treated like children in that sense, that we're treated like children who get to choose the babysitter, who get to choose who's going to govern us or rule us, but we don't get to govern or rule ourselves, right? And so a direct democracy is one in which people don't need a babysitter. They don't need corporations telling them how to run the economy or governments telling them how to run their political affairs. They get to do this themselves directly by coming together, discussing things, and making decisions democratically and collectively in a participatory and grassroots way.
Okay, could you see how that could change in Canada? Does it have something to do with our current party system, or how would that work potentially? Or do you know of any successful stories?
Right. Well, I think this has been a struggle that's been going on for a very long time in one way or another. People struggling to take control over their own communities, their own workplaces, their own lives, and pushing back against the power of these unresponsive institutions and systems of power, such as market regulation and bureaucratic administration and so on. It's been an ongoing struggle for literally centuries, and I think what we see today in the Occupy movement, in a way, it's rekindling or revitalizing this demand or this aspiration on the part of people to take charge of their own lives and communities once again, directly. And so it's something that we've seen often where in a particular time and place there's a kind of, you might say, sort of an outbreak of direct democracy and popular control from below, in the context of revolutions or general strikes or mass protest movements and things like this, where these sorts of things happen, and people often, it does take the form of people physically occupying a workplace, for example, and saying we're going to run our own factory or whatever, or we're going to run our own school, or we're going to democratically run it. Now, often these struggles are defeated, right? And they're defeated because these rich and powerful elites in government and big business have a lot of power and have a lot of resources, a lot of capacity to undermine and defeat these movements. And so it's very hard for these movements to survive and thrive in the long run, because really what has to happen is we have to uproot these systems. We have to get to the bottom of these systems and actually dismantle them and replace them with working alternatives. And there are, in particular times and places, working alternatives. There are, housing cooperatives where the residents, own and operate collectively and democratically their own building. They don't need a landlord and so on. There are worker cooperatives where workers own and operate collectively and democratically their own workplace, and find they don't need a boss, they don't need the stock market or whatever to dictate their behavior. They get to make these decisions themselves. It's hard for these kinds of institutions and practices of democracy and participatory kind of control from below to thrive and survive in a context where they're surrounded by governments that are hostile to those aspirations and ways of doing things, and businesses and markets that reward corporations that you exploit the labor, the cheapest labor they can find, and so forth. So it's hard to compete against these dominant institutions of business and government, but people do it to some degree, and they strive to survive and thrive in that context. And what I think the Occupy movement is saying is we are going to push that as far as we can and as hard as we can against the rule of corporations, the rule of money, and the rule of governments. Now, you're asking in part a question about, can the Occupy movement and its direct democratic institutions, its general assemblies, provide a working alternative to representative democracy as it exists today? And I think the answer is yes, it can. But it's something that might take a long time, it might take a lot of struggle, and will be fiercely opposed by a lot of powerful people. And so we shouldn't be naive about how easy it will be, but we shouldn't limit our aspirations and our hopes. We should insist on taking control of our communities and workplaces, and that's what the movement's all about.
Okay, so I wanted to see how could the direct democracy fit with our current party system. Do you see that fitting at all, or would we have to redo the system?
Well, the whole party system is based on the idea of electing politicians, electing representatives, right? And that's what these political parties are about. Clearly, if people want to organize together and say, let's get together and try to promote a certain idea, like, for example, try to promote the idea of cooperatives, or try to promote some other idea, anti-racist, promoting anti-racism or something. And to do that through the General Assembly, sure, people can work together. And if they want to use that word parties, I suppose they could. But parties, in the sense that we use that term now, it refers to these parties that put forward candidates to elect representatives, right? And that's something that really is, our movement really stands against, I think. It stands against the idea that we are going to elect an elite group of politicians to govern us instead of us governing ourselves. So in that sense, we have to really scrap that whole system, I would say.
Okay, so in essence, even through direct democracy, we would have people representing us. So what is the difference between a party system and...
Well, no, I'm saying in a representative system, we're having people represent us. In a direct democratic system, we are coming together. I would say the ultimate aim, I would say, would be to have people come together in their workplaces. For example, here at the university, to have students and staff and faculty members come together and make decisions democratically about the priorities of the university, about what kind of fees, if any, we should be charging, and what kind of model of education we want to promote, and that sort of thing. So, and I would say more broadly that this is what we want to do with our workplaces and our communities, to come together as communities and democratically decide these things ourselves, and not elect representatives to do it for us, professional politicians. I mean, there may be some times where we have to send delegates to some meeting that can't accommodate everybody. That's something that's, I think can be made consistent with participatory democracy, but not if it's a matter of setting up a sort of special class of professionalized politicians who claim to represent us, but are in fact captive to the power of money and corporate elites and so on.
Okay, I've been a participant as well in Occupy London, and one of the first things that I noticed was that you sort of have to check your ego at the door, and you have to carry a certain sense of humility when you enter the General Assembly situation. What is it about the gatherings of the General Assemblies that could be more representative of a direct democracy that insists that we do this as people if we want to be involved?
Right. Well, I think one of the features of the General Assemblies that is most kind of exciting and most hopeful for the future of democracy is the emphasis on hearing people and giving people a chance to be heard. And that means we sometimes have to sort of step back and not interrupt and so on, give people a chance to say, even if we strongly disagree with what they're saying, we have to give them a chance to be heard and to respond to what they have to say, right? To take them seriously, in other words. And so this is something that it's a sort of skill that we have to cultivate, and we're not necessarily trained to do that because we're not trained to participate in governing ourselves, right? We're trained to watch the news or read the newspaper about other people who govern us, but not to take actual a direct role in governing ourselves. And so it requires that we develop a whole new set of democratic skills of listening, skills of responding to each other's arguments, taking other people seriously, that even when you strongly disagree, and trying to find common ground, trying to find ways of developing proposals that are agreeable to as many people as possible. And so it is a process that, although we participate as individuals and we get to be heard as individuals, we also have to come together collectively and find common solutions and so forth. So in a way it's a very challenging process, but as I say, a very hopeful process for the future.
Yes, and like I said, I found it, there were times when I got really frustrated with the process too, because I wanted to be there and I know the answers and I want to tell people what to do, but quickly I really was able to see after participating the benefit in actually being able to listen to other people and get other people's perspectives. With regards to, we all know London is full of resources. Occupy movements all over the world are looking for secure, safe spaces that they could use for the General Assemblies to, move forward with their structures and stuff like that. Although we have a lot of support, I'm not seeing many that you would think would come forward in London. And do you have any idea why that would be?
Well, I think there are some people who, there are some organizations and institutions and so on that think that we're going away, right? They think that this is a temporary phenomenon, right? That it was something that had kind of made a big splash for a while, but that we won't be here next year. And I think we have to show, over a period of time that we're here to stay and that we can continue to be effective and continue to be, a part of the life of the city, and to an ever greater degree. And I think that as that happens, we'll build stronger, enduring relationships with other parts of the community, whether it's unions or whether it's organizations representing, women's interests, whether it's organizations representing refugees and so forth. All of these organizations that have been part of the community for a long time, organizing things for a long time, need to develop. We need to actively cultivate relationships with these organizations and these parts of the community over time, building solidarity and mutual support. And I think that's already happening, but I think that it's a sort of an ongoing thing, and people need to see us as here as part of in it for the long haul, and then I think that will help cultivate closer relationships and stronger bonds.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you.